I got home from a week-long hiking trip and immediately noticed the mess. Soggy wine glasses, even soggier towels, and something that made my stomach turn. Turns out, Karen from the HOA had been throwing full-blown parties in my hot tub. No permission, no shame. So naturally, I did what any level-headed guy would do. I booby-trapped my spa with bright blue tracer dye and a drop of ghost pepper chili oil. Her scream? Man, it was music. And no, this isn't some exaggerated comedy skit. This is what goes down when a self-appointed HOA queen decides she runs the block. Freeze frame moment? Yeah, that's me right there. The poor sucker whose private well Karen secretly hooked into just to water her overpriced rose bushes. What did I do about it? Oh, I sent raw sewage through her line. You better believe that wasn't the end of it. So how exactly did we go from peaceful backyard evenings to a full-blown HOA-fueled Cold War over hot tubs and plumbing warfare? Let's roll it back a bit. 1 week before the chili oil incident, I had just wrapped up 7 glorious, completely disconnected days hiking through Glacier National Park. No texts, no emails, no Karens, just peace. But the moment I stepped into my yard, I knew something was off. There were wet footprints on the stone path, a wine cork jammed into the deck, and 2 soaked beach towels flung across my chairs, like someone raised a white flag after a poolside brawl. That was weird enough, until I spotted the hot tub cover, half hanging, like someone slapped it back on in a rush. Now look, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but when you drop 11 grand on a luxury spa to help you decompress after a brutal divorce, and come home to lukewarm water and the faint smell of someone else's Chardonnay, your instincts kick in fast. I checked the water, way too low, not hot enough, and there were greasy fingerprints on the side of the tub. Definitely not mine. 1 week before the chili oil incident, I had just wrapped up 7 glorious, completely disconnected days hiking through Glacier National Park. No texts, no emails, no Karens, just peace. But the moment I stepped into my yard, I knew something was off. There were wet footprints on the stone path, a wine cork jammed into the deck, and 2 soaked beach towels flung across my chairs, like someone raised a white flag after a poolside brawl. That was weird enough, until I spotted the hot tub cover, half hanging, like someone slapped it back on in a rush. Now look, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but when you drop 11 grand on a luxury spa to help you decompress after a brutal divorce, and come home to lukewarm water and the faint smell of someone else's Chardonnay, your instincts kick in fast. I checked the water, way too low, not hot enough, and there were greasy fingerprints on the side of the tub. Definitely not mine. Now I know what you're probably thinking. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she figured I'd said it was okay. Oh, sweet naive viewer. If you've never faced down an HOA Karen, let me break it down for you. If you didn't physically bolt something to the ground and yell no in notarized blood, she thinks it's hers. And even if you do say no, she'll fine you for creating tension in the community. So I marched across the street, phone in hand, video queued up and ready to go. Knocked on her door, full of righteous fury. She opened it like nothing was wrong. Pearl necklace, fake smile, and that usual bless your heart energy. Ryan, welcome back. Hope the hike was refreshing, she said like we were best friends. Before I could even open my mouth, she tossed in a casual, "Oh, by the way, hope you don't mind. We used your hot tub while you were gone. Would have been such a shame to let it sit cold." Sit cold? Lady, it's not leftover pizza. I took a deep breath, holding back a meltdown. I mind, I said through clenched teeth. That's private property. You weren't allowed back there. She laughed. Actually laughed. Like I'd just told her a dad joke. "Oh, come on, don't be so uptight," she said, waving it off. "You weren't even home." I was halfway through preparing a perfectly snarky comeback when she added, "Actually, I even sent out a little thank you to the neighborhood." "Hope you don't mind." I did mind, and I minded even more when I saw the thank you. A newsletter from her bogus HOA titled Soak Up the Summer that praised our generous neighbor Ryan for opening his spa for Wind Down Wednesdays. I stared at that newsletter like it had personally betrayed me. My jets felt violated. My chlorine felt dirty. But here's the thing. This wasn't some one-time tub invasion. Karen had been pulling stunts like this for months. She once fined a neighbor because their sunflowers didn't match her imaginary neighborhood color scheme. She sent a cease and desist letter to an elderly couple over wind chimes, claiming they disrupted the peace. This woman wasn't just entitled. She was a full-blown HOA dictator in discount yoga pants. And the worst part? My house wasn't even under her HOA. I lived just outside the official neighborhood line, technically free from all of her fake power, which meant everything she'd done, from trespassing in my yard to plastering my name in a fake newsletter, was completely out of bounds. So I cracked open the HOA charter and started digging. And what I found first made me laugh, then made me furious. Karen had been faking authority over non-members for years. Most people just gave in, too scared of the paperwork war she'd launch. But not me. Not anymore. See, I'm not just some random guy with a fancy spa. I'm a systems engineer. I solve problems for a living. And Karen had just become my favorite puzzle. The next morning, I got to work. I started building a plan that walked the tightrope between totally legal and satisfyingly petty. Step 1, a trip to the pool supply store. I picked up tracer dye, the kind that turns water neon blue if disturbed, and clings to skin like shame at a high school reunion. Then I stopped by the spice shop for a bottle of ghost pepper chili oil extract. Just 2 drops in a tub can make it feel like a chemical warfare simulation. But I wasn't stopping there. I upgraded the cameras, installed motion sensor lights, and just to play the part, made sure the mail carrier loudly heard me say I was heading off-grid again for a weekend camping trip. I even left the porch light off Friday night and preheated the tub. By Sunday, the stage was set, and like a raccoon sniffing out unguarded trash, Karen came right on schedule. But what I didn't realize, what no one in their right mind could have guessed, was that this time Karen wasn't showing up solo. Nope, this wasn't just another unauthorized spa day. She brought company. And not just any company. Someone who would take my petty little revenge and blast it across the neighborhood like a fireworks show on the 4th of July. That's when everything went from mildly hilarious to full-blown suburban scandal. Sunday morning rolled around and here came Karen, waltzing up in a smug little visor and dragging a cooler that clinked with something bubbly. But this time, she didn't come alone. No, she brought backup. 3 other women from her little HOA cabal, including the one who once tried to fine a neighbor for leaving their trash bin out 10 minutes past pickup. And then there was the weird dude I'd seen lurking around their block parties. You know, the kind of guy who always shows up with nothing but Tupperware and awkward vibes. Apparently, that's her cousin. Creepy, clingy, and shaped like a folding chair. But the real surprise? That'd be Mr. Whitaker, the actual HOA president. Yup, the same poor guy Karen quietly pushed out by whispering he was too old to keep. I watched from upstairs, security camera rolling as the whole crew slipped through my side gate like raccoons raiding a picnic. No knock, no message, just a quick glance to make sure I was off the grid again. Then, like they owned the place, they lowered themselves into my perfectly prepped, totally compromised hot tub. Karen, of course, was first in, queen of the HOA hive. She lowered herself down like she was Cleopatra in a chariot, letting out a loud, satisfied sigh. Her posse followed close behind. Laughter echoed, corks popped, glasses clinked. Through the audio feed, I heard Karen crow. Cheers to another beautiful HOA Sunday. And big thanks to Ryan, our favorite nature boy, for letting us use his tub again. They were so proud of themselves. So unaware of the trap they were marinating in. About 10 minutes in, the show started. The water began shifting to a deep electric blue. Not super obvious at first, especially in the sun, but noticeable enough that one of the women paused mid-sip to inspect her legs. She rubbed at her skin, squinting. Karen waved it off. "It's just the jets," she said, sounding annoyed. "This tub always has a bit of color." And then the chili oil kicked in. At first, it was a few itches, some shifting. Then it hit like wildfire. Karen's cousin shot up like someone had shocked him, nearly slipping as he yelled something unholy. Definitely not safe for HOA brunch standards. Karen blinked, confused, and started rubbing her arm. Too late. Bright red splotches were blooming up her neck and chest like angry tattoos. One of the other women screamed and tried to backpedal, smashing into poor Whitaker, who looked like he'd just been personally betrayed by the gods of jacuzzi comfort. And then came the burning. You don't really grasp how sensitive the human body is until ghost pepper oil starts cycling through a hot tub's jets. Panic hit like a tsunami. They scrambled. Wine glasses flew. Someone booted the cooler straight across the deck. Karen exploded out of the water, lost her footing, and slammed onto the wooden boards with a loud, wet slap, trailing bright blue dye like she'd been wrestling a Smurf. I gave it 10 seconds. Then I calmly stepped outside with my phone already recording, live feed synced and ready. Karen was hunched over, dripping and scratching like she'd rolled in fiberglass insulation. She turned to Whitaker, barking at him to call someone, anyone. One woman was trying to dab her eyes with a beach towel. The cousin was on the grass, growling something in what I think was German. I cleared my throat. Karen looked up, sopping wet, blue-tinted and seething with rage. "What the hell did you do to your tub?" she snapped, voice scratchy and furious. I smiled. "You mean the tub sitting in my backyard that you all broke into without a shred of permission? That one?" "You poisoned us," she shrieked. "My skin is on fire." I shrugged. Pool-safe tracer dye. Food-grade chili oil. Nothing toxic. But yeah, probably skip the mirror for a few days. That shade of blue really sticks. She staggered upright. "I'm calling the police." "Please do," I said, holding up my phone. "I've got 5 days' worth of surveillance showing you trespassing. I'd love to make a report. Also, while we're chatting, maybe we should discuss that fake HOA newsletter you sent out. Listing my name and property without consent? Pretty sure that's dancing on the edge of impersonating a legal board decision." Whitaker, now the color of steamed ham, slowly turned to face her. "You told us he gave you permission." Karen froze. I assumed he wouldn't mind," she stammered. "You used HOA funds for this," he said flatly. Her eyes bulged. "It was just for snacks and a couple newsletters." "You used my name," I cut in, stepping closer. "You used my yard. And now the entire HOA board is dyed like Easter eggs." That's when one of the other women, Brenda maybe, whispered, "I'm gonna be blue for my granddaughter's baptism." And just like that, it all started unraveling. Karen huffed, spun around, and tried to save what was left of her pride while dripping dye all over my deck. The rest followed in awkward silence. Whitaker lingered, mumbled an apology, and quietly shuffled off, still clutching his folding chair and the untouched deviled eggs like they were relics of his lost dignity. I spent the next hour replaying the footage from every angle, savoring every yelp and splash. Then I clipped together a highlight reel, Karen's smug entrance, her slow transformation, the mass retreat, and sent the private link to a few trusted neighbors. One of them asked if they could share it in the neighborhood Facebook group. I shrugged. What could possibly go wrong? By Monday, the clip had been shared 34 times. By Tuesday, it hit Nextdoor. By Wednesday, someone made it a meme. My favorite? A shot of Karen mid-scream with the caption, "When the HOA says BYOB, but forgets the don't soak in the engineer's hot tub clause." The fallout came fast, and oh man, it was glorious. Karen tried to flip the whole situation on its head, swearing up and down that I'd rigged my own property in some elaborate act of targeted malice. She showed up at my front door, clipboard in one hand and a face like sour milk, barking that I needed to take down the footage and issue a public apology. I sipped my coffee, calm as can be, and said, "Sure," right after you explained to the board why your lush lawn's been drinking from my private well. She blinked. Yeah, I hadn't let that one go. Months back, I'd noticed the water pressure dipping, which didn't make sense for my setup. So I did some digging, literally, and found a suspicious hose running from a capped-off connection on the far edge of my yard. Guess who'd sneaked in during her landscaping updates and tapped into it? Bingo, Karen. My well, her plants. A one-way unpaid irrigation system. She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up my phone before she could even breathe out a lie. I've got the receipts, Karen. Water meter logs, video proof, even the contractor's work order with your name on it. She stared at me, livid, still faintly tinted blue around the ears, then leaned in and whispered, "You'll regret this." I smiled right back. Not as much as you're about to. See, Operation Hot Tub was just phase 1. Exposing her garden theft? That was phase 2. Phase 3? Oh, that one was spicy. Let's just say it involved sewage, some creative sprinkler rerouting, and one unforgettable garden party. But we'll get there. Because at this point, we were officially at war. And if you're going to square off with a full-blown HOA Karen, you don't come armed with pettiness, you bring plumbing. By the time the Smurf Soak video hit peak meme status, Karen had gone from feared HOA tyrant to neighborhood punchline. People were choking on their lemonade at block parties. Some even started snickering when she jogged by in long sleeves, still trying to exfoliate off that neon regret. But Karen? She wasn't the type to slink away. She was licking her wounds in the shadows, plotting a comeback. Unfortunately for her, I was already way ahead. The day after she failed to guilt me into an apology, I found a very dramatic-looking letter in my mailbox. No email, no HOA delivery box. This was hand-delivered, printed on fake parchment paper, sealed with the HOA logo like it was a royal summons from Queen Karen herself. It accused me of making unsanctioned property modifications, specifically the new motion lights and security cams. Apparently, they offended the visual harmony of the neighborhood. Then it hit me with a $600 fine and a threat of increasing penalties if I didn't comply. Now here's the thing. I'm not even under her HOA. She knew that. I knew that. Hell, the board knew that. But Karen was gambling that if it looked official enough, I'd either cough up the cash or lose sleep over it. Instead, I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Next stop, Mr. Whitaker's place. He opened the door in socks and a wrinkled golf shirt, looking like the dye incident had added 10 years to his life. I didn't waste time. Handed him the letter. He read it, frowned. "She sent this herself?" he asked. I nodded. He sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose like a man realizing he's out of antacids. "She doesn't have the authority," he muttered. "She's been doing this to other residents, too." I thought she stopped. "She hasn't," I said. "And if you want to keep the board from getting sued into oblivion, you'll want to take a look at this." I pulled out my tablet and showed him the digital dossier I'd been putting together. Not just the spa ambush. Months worth of Karen's power-drunk antics. Unauthorized inspections, bogus threat letters, secret meetings held without board approval. My personal favorite? A clip of her pounding on a neighbor's door with a tape measure, claiming their porch light was too yellow. Yes, too yellow. Whitaker sat back, speechless. When I finished, he looked up and asked, "Would you be willing to present this to the board?" "With pleasure," I said. "Just name the time." He called an emergency meeting for that same week, and to my complete delight, he invited me to present, not as a member, but as a concerned neighbor and unwilling participant in Karen's nonsense. I came prepared, laptop, projector, the whole nine. Titled it Operation Karen Fallout. For 20 beautiful minutes, I walked them through it all. Newsletters, forged notes, securital footage, water theft. At one point, a board member actually gasped and said, "Wait, she was charging wine tastings to the landscaping budget." The grand finale, a clip of Karen, wine glass in hand, saying, "Ryan doesn't mind us using the tub. He's probably off hugging trees or whatever." The room went dead quiet. Then someone chuckled, and then everyone burst out laughing. Everyone except Karen. She had shown up 15 minutes late and was now standing in the back, arms crossed, face locked in a silent rage. The vote was unanimous. Officially, they relieved her of duties pending investigation. Unofficially, she was done. She turned on her heel and stormed out without a single word. I followed her from a polite distance, just curious to see where she'd storm off to next. She stomped across the street toward her house, muttering angrily like a villain mid-meltdown. For a second, I thought she might spin around and toss one last insult my way. Instead, she flipped me off over her shoulder and slammed her front door so hard it rattled the porch decorations. By morning, it was official. The HOA sent out a neighborhood-wide email declaring Karen's removal and announced a full audit of board funds. And just like that, the fear was gone. People started talking. One neighbor told me Karen had once threatened to report their kid's treehouse for being an unpermitted structure. Another said she measured their grass with a ruler and left a sticky note that just said, "Unacceptable." Someone else quietly admitted Karen tried to sell them homemade HOA-compliant mailbox flags she printed on her home computer. She had ruled this neighborhood like some dollar store dictator. But now, the villagers had torches. And freedom, of course. Just when it looked like the HOA dragon had been slain, Karen pulled one last stunt from her scorched playbook. She filed a petition with the county to expand the HOA boundary lines, specifically to include my house. I found out about it when a confused county clerk called me and said, do you know someone submitted a hand-drawn map with your property circled in red and labeled non-compliant parcel?" I almost snorted cereal out my nose. I drove straight to county office building, armed with my deed, property map, and a flash drive full of video evidence. The clerk laughed so hard reading her submission, they called their supervisor in just to witness it. The petition got rejected on the spot. Karen's file? Flagged for future review. I asked for a copy of her proposal. It was a masterpiece, scribbles everywhere, scratched out legalese, and a whole section labeled Property Annexation Strategy, like she was planning to storm Normandy. That was it. The gloves were off. Time for Phase 3. Remember that illegal tap she set up into my private well? Well, I had already hired a plumber to reroute that system and install a proper backflow valve. But I didn't stop there. With a little help, I temporarily redirected the waistline from an old gray water tank straight into the line she'd hijacked. Not toxic, not dangerous, just revolting. It all went down at exactly 2:47 p.m. on a warm Tuesday. Karen flipped on her sprinkler system and was instantly met with the scent of sadness and sewage. Her backyard turned into a crime scene. A fine brown mist covered her hydrangeas. Her roses sagged in defeat, like they'd seen too much. She bolted outside in flip-flops, gagging, trying to yank the hose out of the dirt. Too late. She called a plumber, then she called the county, then she called me. I didn't answer. Instead, I strolled out to my freshly disinfected, beautifully sealed hot tub, climbed in, and raised the chilled drink to the sky. Peace, at long last. But in my gut, I knew it wasn't over. Karen doesn't lose. She festers. And sure enough, 2 days later, I found an anonymous letter in my mailbox. No return address, just one ominous sentence, bold and centered. "You'll be sorry when the neighborhood hears what you did to the HOA funds." I read it 3 times, slower each time, You'll be sorry when the neighborhood hears what you did to the HOA funds. Now that was rich, especially coming from the only person who had ever treated HOA money like Monopoly cash. Still, I had to admit, this wasn't random. It was timed. Just as things had started to quiet down, she was flipping the script, trying to cast herself as the victim. Classic Karen. This wasn't just desperation. It was her last Hail Mary pass, and it told me something important. She wasn't out of ammo. She was just reloading. Karen wasn't stupid. Delusional? Oh yeah. Entitled enough to think trespassing should come with a thank you card? Absolutely. But dumb? Not even close. She knew she couldn't win in court or city council. Those battles were over. But public opinion? Reputation? That was still her game. The next morning, my neighbor Todd flagged me down at the mailbox. "Hey man," he said, scratching his head. "Weird question, but did you really bill the HOA for your hot tub repairs?" I blinked. "What?" He looked awkward. "Karen's been telling people you filed for reimbursement. Said something about emotional trauma and replacing the water with imported spa minerals." I laughed. Loudly. So loud Todd took a step back. "No, Todd. I didn't charge the HOA a dime. Didn't even make them pay for the chili oil. And that stuff hurts the wallet." But I could already see the cracks forming. Over the next few days, whispers floated in from every direction. Rumors that I'd used the incident to get a backyard makeover, that I'd claimed my spa had been spiritually violated, that I was suing the HOA for emotional distress. Karen had found her last weapon, gossip. So I did what any sane person would do. I leaned into it. I threw a barbecue, but not just any backyard cookout. I called it the Jet Stream Jubilee, a celebration of clean water, personal property, and neighbors who respect boundaries. I designed custom flyers featuring a cartoon hot tub with a smiley face and a floating sign that read, "Private means private." Then I invited the whole block, HOA members, non-members, even Todd. I even invited Whitaker and Brenda from the board. Hell, I sent one to Karen too. Not because I thought she'd actually show up, please, but just so she'd know the truth. She wasn't being ignored. She was just irrelevant now. And man, the turnout? Better than I ever expected. Folks rolled in with coolers, foil-wrapped side dishes, even brought their own lawn chairs. One guy dragged over a karaoke machine. What started as a casual cookout turned into a full-on neighborhood bash. I kept it low-key. No speeches, no footage, no look what I did. I just let people come to me. And when they asked, I told the story, with a smile, and maybe a little extra sarcasm for seasoning. Didn't need to exaggerate. Karen had written all the punchlines herself. By the time the fire pit was flickering and marshmallows were on, the whole narrative had flipped. I wasn't the guy who took it too far. I was the guy who finally stood up to a neighborhood tyrant and did it with flair. The guy who fought back for his peace, his property, and accidentally gave the block a little breathing room. Neighbors shared stories I'd never heard. One guy admitted Karen once left a note on his windshield accusing him of parking at an angle suggestive of disorder. Another said she'd tried to inspect his backyard for fence misalignment, whatever that means. Toward the end of the night, a few folks floated the idea of nominating me for the HOA board. I just laughed. "Thanks," I said, "but I'm more of a backseat sabotage kind of guy." Still, even as the last burgers were flipped and the fire pit burned down to embers, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't done. And sure enough, the next morning proved me right. But this time, it wasn't a letter. It was worse. It was official. A white city truck pulled up out front. Clipboard, city seal, compliance officer. He knocked, introduced himself, and said he needed to inspect my hot tub. Apparently, there'd been a complaint. Anonymous, of course, alleging improper drainage, unauthorized lighting, and misuse of gray water. Basically, a kitchen sink complaint. They threw every code they could think of into one form and hoped something might stick. I smiled, held the door open, and showed him everything. Permits, water lines, camera timestamps. I even brewed him a cup of coffee while he crouched down to inspect the valve box. The guy was polite, professional, and clearly irritated that his morning had been hijacked by a fake scandal. He handed me a clean report and said, "If you ever figure out who filed this, just know false reports come with real consequences." Oh, I knew, and I had just enough patience left to make sure those consequences made noise. That weekend, I filed a formal harassment complaint with the city. I attached everything: the anonymous notes, the bogus violations, the video of Karen trespassing and tampering with water lines. I CC'd the HOA board, submitted copies to the county records office, and just for fun, I posted a PDF of the whole thing in the neighborhood Facebook group with the caption, "Update: the jets are clear, but apparently the sewage lives on." The reactions rolled in like a wave. Folks were livid, not just because of the hot tub drama, but because Karen just couldn't walk away. She lost, and instead of bowing out, she tried to burn the whole street down behind her. But nobody was following her anymore. She had no audience left. Brenda later told me Karen had lost her voting rights. The board had officially suspended her HOA membership pending an ethics review, which in HOA speak is basically exile. And the final cherry on top? Remember that sneaky tap into my private well? The one she used to keep her roses so smugly perfect? Well, once I shut that down and flushed the line with a little justice, her garden began to wilt. Quietly, slowly, just enough to look tired. That same week, her sprinkler system got flagged as contaminated and required a very expensive overhaul. And that same week, her front yard won Most Improved from a local gardening group. The prize? A $30 gift card and a plastic gnome. She was not thrilled. She doesn't talk to anyone now. Keeps her head down. Still wearing long sleeves. I hear she's been trying to sell the house. But in a neighborhood like ours, word travels fast. Nobody's jumping to buy the chili-dyed lair of the HOA warlord who tried to annex her neighbor and got sprayed with sewage instead. As for me, every Sunday, I still soak in my hot tub, just like before. Only now, there's a tiny floating sign that says, "Jets only, Karen not welcome." And sitting next to it, a little blue rubber duck with a crown. I call him Duke of Dye. Peace, it turns out, doesn't always come from staying quiet or turning the other cheek. Sometimes, it comes from well-placed security cameras, perfectly timed dye packs, and a backyard bash with a petty twist. And as I sit back, cold drink in hand, water bubbling around my feet, I raise a toast to suburban justice. Because when a fake HOA declares war on the wrong neighbor, all bets are off. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and write to the bell, and share your impressions of listening to this story in the comments. Thank you for watching.